Welcome to Don't Work with Tossers, the podcast that will help you rid tossers from your life and improve your work-life blend. Today, I am welcoming Victoria Boden to the studio, the podcast studio, Albion Street Studios in Halifax. I have had the pleasure of working with Victoria, mentoring Victoria on not one, but two funded programmes. Just when she thought she'd got rid of me on one, she ended up getting me back again on another. And she still agreed to come on the podcast, so it must have been good. Today's episode is gender equality and the tossers that just don't get it. And I'm going to let Victoria tell you a little bit about herself. Victoria, hello.
Hello. Oh, it's so nice to be with you. Thank you very much for having me. So a bit about myself. So my background is as a HR professional. I did a number of kind of senior HR roles before I jumped across into the world of self-employment and tech startup. I now run a business called TenSpace, and the work that we do at TenSpace is not a million miles away from the work that I do that I used to do in HR. It's all about employee engagement. So the tech that we built captures anonymous employee feedback, and working on that basis of that kind of ultimate psychological safety of asking people for anonymous feedback. And I work with organisations to then go and transform their culture, improve engagement, build performance, and try and tackle retention in organisations.
And gender equality is quite an interesting subject, isn't it, when you come to HR and HR discussions? But you also have lived experience of your own tossers that may have appeared around gender equality, don't you?
Yeah, I spent a good number of years working in the automotive sector, and tossers definitely show up in that sector on a regular basis. Definitely. I think, you know, I'm quite value driven as a person. I do kind of reading, and you know, I'm very interested in this concept of gender equality. One, because I'm a female and it's important, but it also bleeds into my work, and we can see it in the data when there's tossers in the workplace, you know, leaders who aren't leading in the right way, etc. So there's a lot of that kind of bleeds into my work as well,
and into your personal life as well, doesn't there? Because it's something that features highly. What your lived experience. You're married to Emily,
yes,
and have two beautiful little girls. And I know from my own experience in the different things that I've done that actually people are not always welcoming and can have some real tossery behaviour when they're towards gay people, can't they?
Yeah, I think I've been very lucky in that I think the community have got some real horror stories to share, and I think, you don't have to look very far to find that discrimination, that bias really playing out. I've been very lucky, I think very privileged actually, that Emily and I kind of met quite late on in life, in terms of kind of the relationship cycle of things, and I think we both kind of knew who we were, and I think I've managed to kind of dodge some of that bias and that discrimination. I think I don't know about you, but I feel like you reach a point in your life where you just want to spend time with the people that you want to spend time with, and you cut other people out of your life. And that sounds very brutal, but I think, you just have less and less time for tossers, right? Yeah. And so I think when Emily and I were getting together, actually, that was at a time when actually I'd shed some of the tossers anyway. So I think it was a very kind of welcoming time for us, if you know what I mean.
I have a little book of tossers, Tina's little book of tossers. That's how it all started.
Yeah.
As you well know from my peer mentoring days and the introduction of the little book of tossers and the importance of it. But yeah, I do. I've come across quite a few people in the work that I do, working with business owners, and helping them to improve their work-life blend, the well-being of the business and the business owner. And I've come across different attitudes, but I've also, in my own personal experience, had people close to me who have struggled to come out because of the tossers or people's tossery behaviour.
Yeah.
And I think that breaks my heart, really, because to me it's equality and diversity. I mean, we talked about that in Ange Handa's episode, tossers that discriminate. But I think equality and diversity is such a massive thing, and I do think it is a space where tossers can rear their ugly heads quite often.
Yeah, and I think, one of the things that we explore when we're exploring engagement in an organisation is whether, and we ask this question directly, do you feel like you can be your true self at work? And if you think about somebody who is answering no to that question and the burden that must place upon them, you get out of bed in the morning and you put a metaphorical mask on, and then you go to work and you go and become who you think you should be. That's incredibly draining on somebody. It's very it's not good for their mental health. It can impact on their performance and and it's I think there is no highly engaged teams out there where people can't be themselves at work. One absolutely comes with the other.
Yeah.
And that comes with, discrimination and kind of that diversity and that feeling of belonging in the workplace and that feeling of being able to be your true self at work. Yeah.
And I think that's being your authentic self. I mean, Deborah Ogden, who is all about the personal branding, who was on last week's episode, she talked about being your authentic self, and it's one thing that is massive for me. And this is where in my criteria 6 don't work with tossers, because actually I can't stand those tossers the ones who drain you. And you and I had a very long conversation this morning as we were in the car. You only asked me about parking spaces, and 38 minutes later we were still talking. Yeah. But we were talking about the work-life blend program that I've created, and the first element being it's called It's All About You. And actually that is identifying who you are. It's not about your strengths and your weaknesses and all the usual things that you get asked in some training program that you might be doing at work, but it's all about really drilling down to that. And that helps you be your authentic self. And gender equality is a thing, but general equality and allowing people to be themselves, to me, is so important, because as you say, it's so draining, it's so wearing. And from a HR point of view, I mean, how much time and money is lost from people not being able to be their authentic selves, or taking on a role that actually really a large element of it is not necessarily described in the right way, and they end up taking on something that's just not for them.
Yeah, and I think it's systematic right from the beginning. So if you think about the way that things are gendered in the world of work, you will read a job description for a job advert that isn't necessarily gender neutral. We know that females are less likely to apply for a job that they don't meet all the criteria for, whereas men will have a go. Then I'm on a Facebook group around flexible working and kind of unsurprisingly it's mainly female, and there is, you can feel the anxiety coming out in the posts of like, I've got this opportunity, but I need some flexibility in my life. But we're out there and automatically we've got a job, and it's got to be full time, and it's probably got to be in the office some points. And, we know that an overwhelming number of women in particular have caring responsibilities that it just doesn't work for. But then I'm proper on my soapbox now, because you then think about a lot of the leadership that is supporting these people is heavily weighted to males, and you can see how that gender that gender difference kind of opens up in the workplace and is kind of locked down by the way that we operate.
Yeah, it is, and I think it's even down to, I mean, I know I'm a control freak, okay, which is a good thing, but it's also a bad thing.
Yeah.
And one of the things for me is I am organised, I deal with it, and actually my husband would tell you it's pointless him trying to deal with it because he won't do it right and it won't be done in the way that I want it doing. James and Danny are now laughing at the other side of the camera. And then I'll say to him, oh, well, why didn't you do so-and-so? And the same conversation comes up. And so I have been the one that has got the kids. I mean, they're 31 and 25, so this does not now apply. But I have been the one that have got the kids to school organised, their after-school care, done that, you know, made sure they're at the swimming lessons, or when they were at school, we had somebody that helped me do it. And yeah, Neil worked away. But it was automatically taken on. I do the washing, the ironing, not in a... not necessarily because it's perceived that it's my role, but just because I can't help myself. But I do think as women we do that because culturally it's how it's, in a lot of ways, it's infiltrated into how we do, so you automatically take on. But we don't seem to be breaking that cultural way. You know, I'm what, 55? And I look at...
Are you sure?
Yeah, no, I am. I'm definitely 55. I just don't admit to it all the time, and I question it. But again, I think when I look at a generation below me, it's still similar. Is that our fault because we take, you know, or is that society, or is that... I don't know. And when we talk about equality, I'm certainly not a feminist. And interestingly, I was on a BBC TV programme that Anne Robinson did. And I talked about this. I talked about being an equalist. And I think some of that comes because I'm the mum of 2 sons.
Yeah.
So it's about, you know, we're all in this together. But then our youngest son, he's just got his own house. And I'm uber impressed at the way he is, like, cooking and cleaning and all the things that he never did when he lived at home. And he said to me, yeah, but Mum, that's because you did it all. So I didn't do anything. Why would I? And not in a, you know, like, type of way, but the same conversation as my husband. And I'm like, well, I've not done him any favours, have I? So actually, when I'm talking about making things equal, am I my own worst enemy here? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. It's really hard to break that cycle, isn't it? Yeah. It's really hard to break that cycle. Yeah.
I think it is. And I think, but then we go into the workplace and we talk about flexible working, and we talk about, as you say, all the anxiety coming across in these posts. You can get your soapbox back out if you want. And all the anxiety. And I do think, I know myself that I've not helped myself. And that control freak element in me, which I openly admit, you know, when I was doing this, completing this document that I've got for the element 1 of the programme, and I'm like filling it in, you know, like, what is your strength? Control freak. What's your weakness? Control freak. Yeah. What do you procrastinate over? Being a control freak. What do you jump at? Being a control freak.
I love it, yeah. But I think, you know, I think there's so much more to it as well, because I think, you know, there are other signals that we're picking up as females in the workplace, I believe. So things like, think about the narrative around imposter syndrome. And it's almost like, if you are a female, there's something not right with you if you don't have imposter syndrome now. And you know what? I know loads of people who don't have it. Yeah. And that's cool. But it's almost like, well, if you are a female and you're a leader, then you need to operate in this way. But but you've probably got imposter syndrome about it. So let's just kind of put a lid on it. Or, you know, you will probably need to go and do the school run at whatever time. So let's just put a lid on your success. And, you know, yeah.
The whole imposter syndrome, maybe we ought to have imposter syndrome and tossers as an episode title, because I do think that's an interesting one. And I'm with you on the imposter syndrome. I think it's somewhere that that is now that, like I said to you earlier on, it's a bit like being busy.
Yeah.
It's like a badge. It's like a badge that we've got to wear to make it, you know, being busy is not a badge of honour. I know we've gone completely off piste with this, but being busy is not a badge of honour. It's a little bit like imposter syndrome. We don't have to have it. I often refer to being the opposite of having imposter syndrome. I often get frustrated with people doing jobs that I know that I'm far better at doing, or could do better, and people could be getting better value for money if they were working with me, which is the complete opposite of thinking that I'm not good enough to do it. I actually damn well know I could do it, but somebody else is getting paid loads of money that's not just as qualified. Because, you know, a lot of what I do is about being self-employed, and again, equality. And this isn't gender equality, but this is business size equality. Micro businesses are perceived as being not as capable as big business. And that is, I'm not going to say the word, but it's rubbish.
It is. It is. You know, if I think about my business, if it was a much bigger business, I'd be able to recruit a team around me and bring in all the experts, etc. We're relatively small at the moment. You know what? I'm doing it all. It's really tough, and I just, you know, I think it's harder, if anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jack of all trades and master of most is what I say you are when you're
I get that.
It's not Jack of all trades and master of none. It's Jack of all trades and master of most. I mean, I campaigned to make life in micro business better for 10 years, so I know all about, and I've run micro businesses for 35 years, apart from that brief employed period, which, that was an interesting one. But I think that the perception that micro business owners can't do it, and the perception that actually it's not going to be, even tipping the point when you get beyond micros between 9 and 50, which is a classed as a small business, you know, you seem to be able to do it better. But when you've been self-employed for as long as I have, people just don't get that you might have got the ability, capability, be able to do it. They also don't necessarily understand the value that you can bring, and that's another thing for me around, you know, equal pay terms, and we don't gender equality and equal pay terms, and that's actually, if you're a corporate organisation, you could get paid 4 times as much as you could as a micro business for doing something, because it's perceived that you have the ability and the knowledge. And that's a similar thing when we come to gender equality for pay, isn't it? Because from a HR point of view, and in the larger organisations, and even in the smaller organisations, that's another big issue around gender equality.
Yeah, it is. And I think, you know, there's a legislation now that looks at the gender pay gap, and there's gender pay gap reporting for, I think it's businesses over 200 need to report on their gender pay gap. But there's still no consequences. You can have the biggest gap in the world. You go and put that, you know, that report on your website. There's 0 consequences. Apart from the fact that actually, if you're someone like me who is looking for another role, you're going to look at that gender pay gap and you're going to go elsewhere, because it's going to give you a signal that something's not right there. But there isn't, you know, it's almost like that piece of legislation, the way that it's come about, it's kind of a bit half pregnant. It's like, well, just do the admin of it, will you? Yeah. And then, but don't worry about the outcomes or actually doing anything with it, because there's 0 consequences to it. So don't worry about it.
It's a bit like the pay in 30 days, or some of the stuff that we did through Micro Biz Matters. there actually is no consequences. But that's the same, it's jumping through hoops. And then you'd say to me that it's for businesses over 200 employees. And actually, when you look at it, 96% of businesses in the UK are micro businesses, those that employ 0 to 9.
Yeah.
So it's 5.6 million business owners. 5.6 million people are micro business owners. So when you think about those that employ over 200 as a percentage, that's very, very small.
Yeah.
And as you say, there's zero consequence for it happening, and I find I do. It's the frustration of it all, isn't it? And how can we change that? I mean, is that an education thing, do you think? Do you think it's awareness raising? Do you think it's... I mean, I'd like to think that this one podcast, having a conversation about gender equality and, you know, some of the impacts that people face, is helping to raise that awareness. Yeah. But what more can be done to bring around gender equality for all genders?
I think legislation can help us. So if I think about some of the states in the US where they have now got mandated transparency on salaries and advertised salaries, that's the evidence is suggesting that that's helping. I think people who are creating opportunities in organisations and creating roles, thinking differently about what that can look like and being inclusive of flexibility or, you know, the type of work or location or whatever, and creating those different opportunities. But the brutal reality is actually reflecting on if you are being a tosser in one of those situations and thinking, you know, am I holding people back? Am I being inclusive? Am I being a tosser in this situation? You know, am I doing business in a bar? Am I doing networking meetings that people can't come to? Am I doing deals with people on the golf course? Am I, you know, my hate of golf is probably a whole nother episode as well. But I think there's some people who really need to sit back and think, am I being a tosser? Yeah. Or am I actually helping to unlock some of this stuff? I think it's going to be really interesting, more Gen Z coming into the workplace, and we shouldn't generalise, but the evidence suggests that Gen Z are very values driven. They are searching for places where they can be themselves, where inclusivity is kind of baked into the organisation. And what I'm hoping is that as organisations are bringing in new and fresh talent, they're going to have to change, because they aren't going to be able to attract the talent that they need if they haven't got the right culture and et cetera in place.
I hope so. I really hope so, and I hope that as we go forward, the gender equality and the equality across all organisations changes and shifts for the better. Victoria, thank you. Thank you for being my guest. You've been amazing.
Thank you very much for having me. Thanks.